I'm the Reverend Dr. Jenny McKay. I'm veterinarian, curate, and minister in secular employment, also an environmentalist, activist, and self-confessed cat junkie. But believe it or not, I have never saved a catfish from the jaws of an axolotl. But someone who has done that is my guest, the Reverend Dr. Allan Wright. And Allan is also a vet and also an ordained minister. So before you tell us a little bit about yourself, Allan, can I just ask you about this experience of saving the catfish from the jaws of an axolotl?
Yeah, so just, what you think is a normal day at work. And I get in to be told that there's an axolotl in the waiting room with a catfish stuck in its mouth, which, I thought initially was a wind-up, if I've been completely honest. And then everybody else said, yes, we left it because we didn't know what to do with it. At which point I was rather worried at what experience they thought I had of rescuing catfish out of axolotls' mouths. But the problem was that they put the axolotl into the other tank while they cleaned out its tank, and catfish have got these big spikes out the side of their faces. And the axolotl would take one look and thought, oh, that looks tasty, gone to bite it, and the spike had gone straight through its mouth. So the poor catfish was now wedged in there.
Oh, no.
So I had to, relatively simple, just get a pair of forceps into the axolotl's mouth, clamped it at the base of the spine of the fish, and was able to kind of pull the fish out of its jaw and then kind of let it loose. Some painkillers for the axolotl, and everybody was happy. So.
Yeah. So it didn't need a general anaesthetic, nothing like that.
No, I was worried it might do, but actually it let me do it conscious, which was great, because they're not the easiest of creatures to knock out.
No. Oh, that is absolutely amazing. I have never, ever come across a case like that. Not at all. So, Allan, moving on to what you do, you've said, of course, you're a vet, but also very interested in the fact that you're an ordained minister. So can you tell me how those two careers happened?
Yeah, so I graduated as a vet in 2011 and been working as a vet for kind of 10 and a half, coming up 11 years, and then got this calling that I was supposed to do something within the church. I kind of felt, as I'm sure probably you did as well, being a vet is quite busy enough that the last thing I need is something else to do. So kind of hummed and hawed and kind of played around with that idea for a little bit, and eventually went, okay, well, let's start this process and see where it leads. And then in 2019, I finished that entire pathway to the point where I thought, okay, this is a good place to stop, and ended up being ready to be ordained. But I'm in a slightly odd situation that I'm a Church of Scotland minister, but I live and work in England, in which there are relatively few Church of Scotlands. So the question then came, what do I do with this ministry? And what is the purpose of this ministry? I'm a minister, but what's the calling to do with that? And at the same time as we were exploring all this kind of where can we utilize a minister, there was more and more stuff coming out in the veterinary press about high levels of mental health problems and increased levels of suicide in the profession, and kind of the drain and just the kind of the dampening on the profession, which wasn't there 10 years ago. Or not to the same extent, I don't think. And then these two things just kind of came hand in hand. And on one side, we're getting all this information, we have a real need for something and nobody to do it. And on the other hand, it's going, I'm ready to do something, but I don't know who needs it. And suddenly the two just kind of went, hang on a minute. Mm-hmm. These link up. This is what it's supposed to be.
Yes. So you hadn't initially thought that your calling was to be, I suppose, you call yourself a pioneer minister, don't you? But yeah. It took a while for that to develop in the thought process.
Yeah, and initially I was thinking, as your traditional ministers do, that I would end up in a church with a congregation, and I would, preach every Sunday, and I would be kind of helping with groups and things during the week and kind of being part of the life of that congregation, and then ended up with something totally different.
Yeah. And do you think COVID-19 has made things much worse for vets with regard to mental health issues?
I think COVID-19 probably hasn't helped anybody's mental health at all. But I think in those places where mental health was already a problem, such as in the veterinary community, that has definitely kind of consolidated all that and heightened it. And vets find themselves, I think, a lot of the time in this kind of strange place where they don't really fit into any kind of box. You go into all these forums and it's, occupation, and you scroll down the list and you're never quite sure where you fit because vet isn't there. And you're not quite sure whether you're healthcare or services or whatever. And I think COVID-19, the perfect example of that was vets were seen as an essential industry. So we're expected to go to work. But vets themselves, unless they were farm animal vets, were not seen as key workers.
Yes.
Which meant that they couldn't send their children to school. And actually, during the first lockdown, they weren't allowed to leave their house. So how do you continue to work in a way that you need to see clients and you need to see patients to diagnose them and work things out when you're not actually allowed to go to work?
Yeah, it is. It is a difficult predicament, isn't it? They kind of fall between those two aspects, don't they? Not seen as part of the medical profession, but yes, essential, as we know. And how do you at the moment reach out to people in the veterinary community? Yeah,
so this is something completely new. As far as anyone can tell me, in both Scotland and England, there is no other minister doing this. So this is completely new for the church, and it's completely new for vets. Doctors, particularly doctors who work in hospitals, are used to having a chaplain. They're used to having a minister who is there for them. But for vets, this is something totally new. So at the moment, it's all about just introducing myself, kind of doing what we're doing now, just having a chat and just kind of saying, hello, I'm here. This is who I am. And this is somebody, I'm available to talk to. So at the moment, it's a case of, and I am restricted purely for time and everything else, to kind of half an hour radius, of where I am. But just going around all those practices and visiting and popping in and saying, hello, this is who I am. What's going on with you? Because there's plenty of practices that are taking on new staff or moving to different premises or really struggling for staff and really short-staffed and having to deal with that as well. So, and every practice is a different story. There are some that have maybe just got new management. I can think of various examples of all these things that I'm talking about among the practices that I visit.
And it must be really refreshing for them, for, having somebody coming into the practice who's actually asking what's going on in your life, and what are the issues? Is there anything I can do to help? It's very different to the clients coming in or people coming in to sell things to veterinary practice.
I think that's it. There's loads of people that go into a veterinary practice on a weekly basis, but they all go in for a reason. They've either got a sick pet that they're worried about, or, as you say, it's a rep from a drug company or something trying to convince you that this product's better than the old one. But actually, somebody to go in who goes, I've not particularly got an agenda here. I just want to find out what's going on. And I usually take donuts, which always helps.
You've got a sweet tooth. And I'm sure people are fascinated when they meet you. I mean, I know when I went into work, when I started going in with the colour, I was a bit worried that people would be like, oh, look, she's a vicar. I don't really want to speak to her. But I find in general, people were just more curious and very interested, actually. Is that your experience as well, Allan?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think because this is so weird to vets, the fact that there's a minister for them, and you go in and go, oh, you're a minister, what church are you with? And going, well, I'm not with a church, I'm your minister. I'm here for, I talk about the veterinary community. So by that, I mean vets and vet nurses and, and veterinary assistants and veterinary receptionists. It's basically anybody who works in clinical practice. And again, I've had to narrow that down because we know there are lots of vets that don't work in clinical practice. But again, just for timing and everything else, to focus that in on those vets who are in clinical practice, who are seeing clients and treating animals, pets or farm animals usually every day.
Yeah. So getting back to, when you were starting off as a vet, well, what made you think of becoming a vet in the first place?
I don't know. I honestly have no idea. I'm one of those people that, says it's something I've always wanted to do. I can remember all the way back in primary one or reception in the English system, people saying, what do you want to be when you grow up? And saying, I want to be a vet. And then lo and behold, 14 years later, when turned 18, there I was going to vet school. And never really deviated from that path at all. So one of those
that's amazing.
Strange and unusual cases that kind of what I wanted to be as a child is what I am now.
Yeah. And did you have pets as a child?
Yes, I grew up. It was always cats or dogs or sometimes both in the house.
Okay, but you weren't from a farming background?
No, not from a farming background at all. The closest thing in terms of anybody else in the family being involved is my grandpa, the SSPCA, and that was the closest I ever got into any kind of vet or even medical within my family.
Yes, yeah, I guess it was a little bit similar for me as well. I always was very interested in animals, and I just wanted to be a vet. I think I knew in my head I didn't really want to work with sick people, which maybe wasn't a very good reason, but I was always interested in animals. So a bit like you since a child, and it just happened from there. And then this calling to be a minister, when did that first begin?
Yeah, so that, unlike being a vet, I can tell people exactly when that was.
Oh, right.
And that was at the end of my first year at vet school, at one of the back gates out of Glasgow University. And at one side of the gate, I had no thoughts whatsoever of being a minister. And I stepped through the gate, and the other side, I was going, I'm supposed to do something in the church.
And it just happened as quickly as that.
And it wasn't it wasn't that I heard a voice or anything particularly audibly. It was just very much hadn't crossed my mind at one side, and at the other side, a really strong understanding that's what I was supposed to do. And of course, I've got 4 years of studying and exams to do. I'm not thinking about that at the moment. Yeah.
So you're very, very much focused on the veterinary work, of course, while you were doing the study. Yeah. So you've got a very, very busy life. You're trying to balance these two jobs. What do you do to de-stress after a busy day at the clinic?
I'm just a big fan of kind of losing myself in some kind of fictional world. So whether that's reading, whether that is watching TV, particularly drama, something that's slightly kind of far-fetched, I like kind of more science fiction, fantasy, superhero stuff, but something that's too real, I'm kind of like, no, that's too much thought, and certainly not a vet program.
No.
Come home and put it on, and there's the Yorkshire Vet or something on. Like, no, that's too much like work.
Yes, there's something on all the time, and then they brought out All Creatures Great and Small again, didn't they?
It's like, oh no. And of course, it's something that clients always like to ask you. Did you watch? You're like, no, it's a busman's holiday. That's the last thing I want.
Exactly.
I get home.
But I do know that you're very, very keen on Doctor Who. And I think you've seen every episode since 1963.
Yeah, so there's a couple that are missing that they don't have.
What a shame.
That have just kind of disappeared from history and don't exist. But yeah, I have seen every single one right the way back from William Hartnell in 1963 all the way up to kind of last year's Jodie Whittaker series. So I've seen every single one of them.
Wow. And who's your favourite Doctor?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they've all got their own merits. I think, there's very few that I don't think I like particularly. Well, if I had to say one, probably Matt Smith.
Oh, yes.
I liked Matt Smith.
And Judy, she was the first female one, wasn't she? But I think she's going to be leaving quite soon, isn't she?
Yeah, I think she's in this year for a couple of specials, and I think she's gone at the end of this year. So.
Yeah, so who knows who's going to replace her?
It's like James Bond, isn't there? There's always about a million names thrown up in the air, and you're like, it could be any of them. No one knows.
Right. But I know that you've also got some other weird animal stories. Did I hear a rumor that you had helped a snake who was stuck in a Hoover?
Yeah, that is the traditional Friday night emergency. So that vets, for being so scientific people, are so surrounded by superstition, and one of them is there will be an emergency on a Friday afternoon. That is exactly what happened here. It must have been half an hour before closing on Friday, but we're all getting ready for the weekend, and somebody phoned to say that they'd left the bit of the Henry Hoover that connects the Hoover to the nozzle out, and the snake had decided to go through it and got halfway through and realized it didn't fit, and was now stuck in this metal tube.
No.
So we had to bring this snake in, and it got halfway through, but the back end where all the drainage was now swelling because it was stuck. So we definitely couldn't get through it. It couldn't go backwards because the scales don't go backwards. So we had to sedate that snake in order to, and then cut the ends of the Hoover to expand it out enough to loop the snake up, and then pull it backwards out of this metal pipe. Which, it's not something they ever teach you at vet school.
No, they don't. I always remember I used to tremble when I knew there was one of these exotic animals or a bird sitting in the waiting room. Because we don't learn so much about that, do we? No. Oh my word, that is crazy. And I know as well, we were talking about, I know you like Doctor Who, but you're also a bit of an actor as well, aren't you?
I used to. It's something I would love to get into again. I used to when I was kind of school age, just going into university age. I used to love getting on stage and doing bits and pieces and things.
And I think that's good because you've been a minister as well, isn't it? Gives you the confidence.
Well, that's right. It's all the
speak to people,
public speaking, and being able to kind of speak and not being fazed by a crowd or a group of people, and just having that confidence.
Good experience.
Helps in vetting as well. You don't want to go into a consultation when the whole family's there and then suddenly dry up and being afraid to talk to people. So
I think they do something in their training now with the vets that they get amateur actors in. Pretend to be.
We actually had it, or not. We had at our final exams. We had, I can't remember, it was 2 or 3 questions where we had an actor in our final exams that we had to go and talk to.
Okay.
Which was interesting. It's really difficult when you do acting that you've got to try and
acting yourself,
and do it as an exam as a vet and not as some kind of improvisation piece. Like you're trying to go in and act opposite them, and you go, that's not the point.
Yeah, a very, very different experience. So what advice would you give if there's anybody listening now that would be considering a career in veterinary medicine?
I think it's a brilliant career. I really think, you get all sorts of opportunities and all sorts of different things. But I think people have to be aware that it's not all about cuddling puppies and kittens. And actually, it can be really, really tough. We deal with a lot of sick patients, very sick patients. We deal with a lot of patients that we just can't get better. And the profession at the moment is short-staffed. There is very much a perception that vets, and particularly veterinary nurses, get paid an awful lot more than they do. And I think it just being realistic that it's not the glitzy glamour career that sometimes it looks like on the telly program. Sometimes there's a lot of not so nice stuff goes on in the background as well.
Yes, that's right. And I remember it wasn't so long ago, I was listening to a program, I think it was this morning, and they were talking about that topic, vets charge too much. And I was so annoyed about that, because I just think people don't understand, because you've got a National Health Service, that they don't understand that there's cost to what you're doing. There's the drugs, there's a practice, there's a staff. And yeah, it is probably the fact people here to get NHS.
That's it. I think I've always said it would be beneficial if we all got a bill at the end of NHS treatment, just to know how much it would have cost.
Yes.
And I think, because we don't break it down in vet, just a consultation. We don't say vet's wage, nurse's wage, heating bill, lighting bill, and all these things have got to be paid for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a perception, it is a vocation and it's a caring profession, and these are animals, so maybe you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart.
So there's certainly a degree of that. We all go into this job because we care and we want to look after animals and we want to do our best for them and their owners. But equally, we still have to get shopping in at the end of the month, and there has to be some way of paying for that, unfortunately.
But you're right. It is a wonderful profession, and the people and the colleagues they're all wonderful, and everyone's working for the benefit of the pets. And as you say, the owners as well, people take a great pride in what they're doing. So yeah, very good profession. And also, many careers is, that you can end up afterwards in, not just practice.
No, yeah.
So very, very, very exciting career, I think.
And I think, so often that, people, when they think about vets, think about the people that they see when they go to the vets, or, the people that go out to farms and stable yards. And that's kind of where my ministry is focused, but they forget that there are vets in research in the universities, there's vets in labs, there's vets that go out with the army, when they go out with their horses and their dogs, and who help with animals in the war-torn places that they're going to. And there's all sorts of other things that vets do that people don't think of as vets. So there's all sorts of things you can do with it.
But being a minister as well, I mean, that's amazing. I don't think I'll ask the question, what would you advise somebody who wants to be a vet and a minister? Because you're unique. You're unique in Scotland, and as we've talked before, you're the first vet and minister. That
I think it just gives me such a unique kind of perception when I go in to speak to people, because I'm going in as somebody outside their workplace. You're going as the minister, that they can talk to, and they don't need to feel that they're being judged or anything's going to get reported back to the boss or any of that. But equally, because I'm in that world, in that community, I understand what they're talking about, and I understand kind of the troubles of the profession, that maybe somebody coming from outside maybe wouldn't quite understand, or certainly wouldn't understand as quickly.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You're walking alongside them, and all the ups and downs in the profession. But I think, just talking to you, you are a vet, you are a minister, but for people listening, anybody who's got a career and is perhaps thinking they've been called to ministry, it's perfectly possible to keep that secular career and the sacred career. They're both intermingled, though, aren't they?
There's certainly, in every denomination, nearly every denomination has different ways of doing it, but almost all of them have this option to remain in secular employment doing one job, but yet being a minister and fulfilling that calling at the same time alongside. Yeah.
But it's it's a special career, and that's a gift in itself, isn't it? And I guess that's why you are combining the two. So that's absolutely fantastic. So what about plans for the future? I know your ministry was curtailed a little bit in COVID, very difficult to go out into practices at that point. How do you see yourself, the frequency that you go out to practices, for example? How do you think that's going to develop?
It's more and more just visiting all these practices, getting to know people, getting some kind of joined up thinking. I think the veterinary community is very good at within individual practices. There's support and there's understanding, but then because the practice down the road is in competition to them, there's no joined up thinking. and it'd be nice to kind of build some bridges and build some kind of community there, and even start to think about things like can we do events? When you're at vet school, there's throughout the year there's all sorts of events that people were invited to and everything else, and then you leave vet school and suddenly there's nothing, and you go off into your own little practice and you're stuck there. It'd be nice to try and build something just to kind of celebrate being vets. I think we focus an awful lot on what's difficult. We focus an awful lot on the kind of the hardships, but actually there's some really great stuff about being a vet as well, and it'd be nice to kind of celebrate that and just be able to take some time to go, no, do you know what, this is good, and we appreciate vets, and particularly we appreciate nurses and reception staff that are often forgotten along the way as well.
Yes, that's right. And I think, as you said, we also have a shortage of veterinary nurses as well, not just vets. Lots of potential for people out there if they're thinking about a career in veterinary medicine.
I think it'd just be really interesting, to see where the ministry is in kind of 5 years, 10 years time, once it's kind of established and it's a little bit easier when there is some joined up thinking and we can start doing things around that. At the moment, it's I'm going to visit practice A this week and practice B next week and practice C next week, and there's no kind of joined upness there. Once all that's in place, people know who I am. But really interesting to see how that takes forward.
Yeah. No, brilliant. Well, you are called a pioneer minister, and you are a pioneer because it's unique what you're doing.
The most pioneer of pioneer ministers that I know. So I know a couple, but there's at least a couple of them doing similar things. This is completely new, so learning from them, but setting out on my own as well. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So very, very exciting, and I guess you've got to be very independent and resilient as well, because it's a new thing. But doing a fantastic job, and I know when we first spoke, I was intrigued to hear what you were doing, and I think it's really wonderful. And of course, at that point, I didn't know that you'd done that other thing, saving a catfish from the jaws of an axolotl. So usually at the end of my podcast, when somebody's done something that I don't do, I usually make a resolution that I will try to do it myself. But I think in this case,
it's a bit difficult to arrange.
Probably quite relieved. Yes, it is, isn't it?
But if you come across it, it can be done.
Yeah, I think that would be a miracle. That would be a sign if somebody presents me with a catfish in the jaws of an axolotl. That would definitely be very, very interesting. So, Allan, really, really good to talk to you. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the very best in your ministry. And I'll be looking forward to seeing how it all develops.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.